I stared at the email that wasn't meant for me, my coffee growing cold beside my laptop. I can't bring Laura to the presentation. She's just a housewife with opinions, not someone who understands our industry. My husband Ryan had accidentally CC'd me on an email to his department head at TechVision Inc., 10 years of supporting his career while putting my marketing degree on hold, and this is how he saw me. Just a housewife. The words burned into my brain as I closed my laptop, trying to process the casual dismissal of everything I was, and everything I'd given up. That same night, I confronted him in our kitchen, phone in hand with the email still displayed. Ryan barely looked up from his dinner, annoyed at the interruption. "It's just office politics, Laura. You're overreacting. You don't understand how things work in tech." The next morning, he left for a 3-day business trip. I spent those 3 days packing my essential belongings, consulting with a divorce attorney, and drafting a business plan I'd kept in the back of my mind for years. By the time Ryan returned, I had signed a lease on a small apartment and withdrawn half our savings. Exactly my fair share. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. A newly divorced woman with an outdated marketing degree and a decade-long resume gap. That's how the world saw me. Pathetic. But 18 months later, Ryan would walk into an investor meeting and freeze when he saw me sitting across the conference table. He had no idea who I'd become. My name is Laura Chen. At 35, I found myself rebuilding my life from scratch, dismantling the careful fiction I'd maintained for a decade. That postponing my career to support my husband's was a partnership, not a surrender. I met Ryan Weber during my final year of business school at Northwestern. I was the marketing student with detailed plans for launching a digital agency specializing in tech startups. He was the brilliant software engineer whose dating app was gaining traction on campus. We were both ambitious, driven, and certain of our futures. Or so I thought. We married a year after graduation. Ryan's app had caught the attention of TechVision, a growing enterprise software company in Chicago. They offered him a position that promised rapid advancement and equity options, the dream scenario for a young developer. The catch? Long hours, intense pressure, and complete dedication. "It's just for a couple of years," Ryan assured me as we discussed the role. "I'll establish myself. Then we can focus on your agency idea. This will give us the financial cushion to make it happen." It made sense. We were partners. His success was our success. My agency could wait a little longer. Those first months in Chicago, I networked aggressively, making connections with local startups while applying for marketing positions. When a promising opportunity came through, a marketing coordinator role at a tech incubator, Ryan's reaction surprised me. "The hours won't work with my schedule," he pointed out over dinner. "I'm relying on you to handle things at home while I'm establishing myself. Maybe something part-time would be better for now?" The concern seemed reasonable. Ryan was working 70-hour weeks. Someone needed to maintain our life outside of work. I took a part-time contract position instead, focusing primarily on supporting Ryan's increasingly demanding career. Days turned into months, months into years. The couple of years of intense work became 5, then 7. Each time I brought up my agency plans, there was always a compelling reason to wait. Ryan was up for promotion, TechVision was going through reorganization, the market wasn't right. Meanwhile, I became the perfect tech wife, hosting dinner parties for Ryan's colleagues, proofreading his presentations, managing our entire domestic life so he could focus exclusively on his career. I kept my skills current through online courses and freelance projects, but my dreams of founding my own agency faded into the background, becoming more hypothetical with each passing year. I wouldn't admit it then, but I was slowly disappearing into Ryan's shadow, my identity increasingly defined by his success. The worst part? I convinced myself this was my choice, that I was being strategic, patient, supportive. I told myself the story that successful partnerships required sacrifice, and it was simply my turn to be the supporter rather than the supported. What I didn't realize was how Ryan had come to see me during those years. Not as the talented marketing strategist temporarily on hold, but as just a housewife. Someone whose opinions on business and technology held no value. The accidental email changed everything. It wasn't just the dismissive words that shattered my perception of our marriage. It was recognizing that the presentation Ryan was discussing included marketing strategies I had helped him develop the previous weekend. Ideas, he was now implying, came solely from him, while I was just the uninformed wife with opinions. When I confronted him that evening, I expected shock, remorse, perhaps even panic at being caught. Instead, Ryan's mild annoyance at my overreaction revealed something far more damaging. He truly believed what he'd written. In his mind, I had transformed from an equal with valuable expertise into a domestic support system with cute but irrelevant ideas. "You're making this into something it's not," he said, finally looking up from his plate. "Dave is old school. He responds better when ideas come from the team, not from spouses. I was just playing the game." "By dismissing me as just a housewife?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Ryan sighed, his expression a mixture of impatience and condescension. "Look, you chose to put your career on hold. That was your decision. I didn't force you to become a housewife." The revisionist history was breathtaking. The countless small discouragements, the scheduling conflicts that always seemed to arise whenever an opportunity came my way, the subtle implications that my ambitions were secondary, all reframed as my choice, my decision to step back. "I've got an early meeting tomorrow and then I'm heading to the Denver conference," Ryan said, standing to clear his plate. "Can we table this discussion until I get back? You're upset, and I don't think we'll get anywhere productive tonight." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As he left the kitchen, I sat alone, staring at the email still displayed on my phone, seeing our entire relationship with painful clarity for the first time. The 3 days while Ryan was in Denver became the most transformative of my life. I moved with methodical precision, as if executing a long-planned strategy rather than responding to a sudden crisis. First, I consulted with Patricia Mendez, a divorce attorney recommended by a former colleague. I laid out my situation with unexpected composure: 10 years of marriage, progressive diminishment of my career prospects, joint assets, no children. "This happens more often than you'd think," Patricia said, her expression sympathetic but practical. "Especially in tech and finance marriages. The supporting spouse wakes up one day and realizes they've become invisible." "I'm not invisible," I replied. "I'm just a housewife with opinions." Patricia smiled grimly. "That's actually better for us. Documented dismissal of your contributions. Have you maintained any professional activities during the marriage?" I detailed my freelance projects, online certifications, and the unpaid marketing assistance I'd provided to Ryan's career. The presentations edited, strategies developed, networking opportunities facilitated. By the end of our meeting, I had a clear understanding of my legal position and financial options. That afternoon, I withdrew exactly half of our accessible savings, an amount Patricia assured me was reasonable and defensible, and transferred it to a new account in my name only. Next, I called Mina Park, my closest friend from business school, who now ran a successful digital marketing agency in Seattle. "I need a fresh start," I explained after summarizing my situation. "Somewhere, away from Chicago, away from TechVision's shadow. Seattle has a vibrant tech scene that's always looking for marketing talent," Mina said without hesitation. "I've been trying to open an office there for ages. Come be my West Coast director. You can stay with me until you find your feet." The offer was tempting. A clean break, a ready-made position, a supportive friend. But something held me back. the same something that had been simmering in my mind for years. An idea that had never fully disappeared despite all the reasons to postpone it. I appreciate that more than I can say, I told Mina. But I think it's finally time for me to launch my own venture. The agency you always talked about? Mina asked. Not exactly. Something more specific. Remember my thesis on marketing automation gaps for scaling companies? The one that Professor Coleman said was ahead of its time? Of course. It's not ahead of its time anymore. In fact, I think the market is perfectly aligned for it now. That night, I stayed up until dawn, researching market conditions, competitor, offerings, and potential clients. I dug out my old thesis, surprised at how much of it remained relevant, and how much first-hand knowledge I'd gained watching TechVision's products fall short of what their clients actually needed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. By morning, I had the skeleton of a business plan for Aspect Solutions, a marketing automation platform designed specifically for mid-market companies that were underserved by both enterprise giants like TechVision and small business-focused tools. The very segment Ryan had repeatedly dismissed as not worth pursuing whenever I suggested it. The final day before Ryan's return, I secured a modest one-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park, arranged for a mover to collect my essential belongings the following week, and reached out to 3 former clients from my freelance work to gauge their interest in beta testing a new marketing automation platform. When Ryan returned home that evening, he found me calmly drinking tea at our kitchen island, a manila envelope on the counter between us. "What's this?" he asked, setting down his luggage. "Divorce papers," I said simply. "And my forwarding address. I'll be moving out next week." Ryan stared at me, then at the envelope, his expression cycling through confusion, shock, and finally anger. "This is ridiculous. You're ending our marriage over one email? Over one comment made in a professional context?" "No," I said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm ending our marriage because that email showed me how you truly see me. And I'm reclaiming the career and life I put on hold while you built yours." "Laura, be reasonable," Ryan said, his tone shifting to the patient one he used when explaining technical concepts he thought were beyond my comprehension. "You're talking about throwing away 10 years because your feelings were hurt. Let's take some time. Maybe see a counselor." "I've taken 10 years," I interrupted. "And I've seen how you discuss me with your colleagues. No counselor can fix the fact that you genuinely believe I'm just a housewife with irrelevant opinions." "That's not fair," he protested. "I value your input. As long as you get the credit for it," I finished for him. "The marketing strategy you're presenting next week? The competitive analysis of TechVision's positioning gaps? Those were my ideas, Ryan. Ideas from just a housewife." He had the grace to look momentarily ashamed before rallying. "What are you gonna do? The job market isn't kind to resume gaps, especially in tech. You're being impulsive." There it was, the familiar undermining of my capabilities wrapped in concern. How had I not seen it clearly before? "I'm launching my own company," I said, rising from the stool. "Focused on the mid-market segment you've always insisted isn't viable. I guess we'll see which one of us understands the industry better." Ryan's laugh held more disbelief than humor. "A startup? Now? With what experience or connections?" "With the experience I've gained watching TechVision repeatedly fail to meet client needs. With the connections I've maintained despite your assumption that I've just been playing house for a decade." I moved toward the door, then turned back. "The divorce terms are straightforward. Equal division of assets, no ongoing support either way. I think you'll find them more than fair considering the circumstances." "Laura, wait," Ryan called, his voice losing its condescending edge as the reality of my departure sank in. "We can work this out. You don't have to leave." I paused, hand on the doorknob. "That's where you're wrong, Ryan. I absolutely do have to leave. Not just this house or this marriage, but the shadow I've been living in while you built your career, on my support, and sometimes on my ideas. The look of genuine surprise on his face as I closed the door behind me confirmed everything. In 10 years of marriage, Ryan had never truly seen me. My ambitions, my capabilities, my potential. He'd accepted my support while gradually reducing me to a domestic role in his mind. Walking to my car, I felt a curious mixture of terror and exhilaration. At 35, I was effectively starting over, professionally, personally, completely. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with potential failure and financial insecurity. Yet underneath the practical concerns ran a current of something I hadn't felt in years: genuine excitement. The kind I'd experienced in business school when envisioning my future, when every possibility seemed open and attainable. Somewhere, along the way, I'd surrendered that feeling to the practical compromises of supporting Ryan's career. Now, driving away from the life we'd built together, I reclaimed it. Not just the excitement of building something new, but the fundamental belief that my ideas, my work, my vision mattered. Ryan had dismissed me as just a housewife with opinions. In doing so, he'd inadvertently given me the push I needed to become his most formidable competitor. The first 6 months after leaving Ryan were the hardest of my life. The tidy narrative I'd constructed during those 3 days of clarity gave way to the messy reality of starting over at 35. My apartment in Wicker Park, chosen hastily during that whirlwind of decision-making, seemed to mock me with its Spartan furnishings and echoing emptiness. I'd brought only essentials: clothes, my laptop, a few personal items that were undeniably mine. Everything else remained in our Lakeshore Drive condo, awaiting the division that would come with the divorce settlement. The divorce itself proceeded with unexpected smoothness. Ryan, perhaps stunned by my sudden transformation from accommodating wife to determined founder, didn't contest the straightforward terms I'd proposed. Our mediator remarked that it was among the most amicable divorces she'd facilitated, though amicable didn't quite capture the cold efficiency with which we dismantled our shared life. "You're really going through with this startup idea?" Ryan asked during our final meeting, signing the last of the paperwork. His tone balanced somewhere between condescension and genuine curiosity. "Aspect Solutions is already incorporated," I replied, neither defensive nor boastful. "I've secured initial funding and lined up 3 beta clients." This wasn't entirely accurate. The initial funding consisted of my divorce settlement and a small personal loan from Mina. The beta clients were former freelance contacts who had expressed tentative interest but signed nothing. Yet something in me refused to give Ryan the satisfaction of seeing my uncertainty. His eyebrows rose slightly. "Impressive turnaround. Who's handling your technical development?" The question hit a nerve. Technical development was my most pressing challenge and biggest knowledge gap. I had the marketing expertise, the business concept, even the market research to validate my approach. What I lacked was someone who could build what I was envisioning. "I'm evaluating several options," I said vaguely, gathering my copies of the signed documents. "Best of luck with TechVision's Denver expansion." I saw the surprise register on his face that I knew about their confidential growth plans, but I was already walking away, the heavy door of the mediator's office closing definitively behind me. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. It was done. The marriage that had defined my adult life was officially over, dissolved into assets divided and separate futures. That evening in my sparse apartment, I opened a bottle of wine and my laptop simultaneously. With the divorce finalized, I couldn't afford the luxury of uncertainty any longer. I needed a technical co-founder, and I needed one quickly. The Chicago tech community was vast but tight-knit, with connections radiating through co-working spaces, incubators, and the endless cycle of meetups and launch parties. I'd maintained peripheral involvement during my marriage, attending events when they didn't conflict with Ryan's schedule, keeping my skills current enough to follow industry developments. Now I immersed myself completely, attending 3 to 4 events weekly, reactivating dormant professional relationships, and being surprisingly candid about my situation. I'm Laura Chen, previously Laura Weber, recently divorced, launching a marketing automation platform for mid-market companies, looking for a technical co-founder who's tired of building products that overpromise and underdeliver. The directness was both strategic and necessary. I had no time for the gradual relationship building that typically preceded co-founder arrangements. My runway, the combined funds from my divorce settlement and Mina's loan, would last approximately 8 months at my current burn rate. I needed to move quickly. 3 weeks and 27 coffee meetings later, I found myself sitting across from Daniel Okafor at a small cafe near the University of Chicago campus. Daniel had been recommended by a former classmate who'd seen my increasingly desperate posts on tech forums. He's brilliant but difficult, my contact warned. Turned down offers from Google and Amazon to finish his PhD in computer science. Not sure if he's looking to join something as risky as a startup, but he might be your best option technically. Daniel was younger than I expected, probably 30, with intense focus behind wire-rimmed glasses and a directness that matched my own. "Your concept isn't novel," he said after I'd outlined Aspect Solutions. "At least 3 companies are working in similar spaces." "I'm aware of CompStack, MarketSync, and Lighthouse," I replied, having researched my potential competitors exhaustively. "They're all approaching mid-market automation from an enterprise perspective scaled down. I'm building from the ground up, designed specifically for companies that have outgrown basic tools but don't need or want enterprise complexity." Daniel nodded, clearly having tested whether I'd done my homework. "Why you? What makes you qualified to solve this problem?" The question would have intimidated me 6 months earlier. Now I recognized it as the essential due diligence of a potential co-founder, not an attack on my capabilities. I spent 10 years watching TechVision and similar companies fail to serve this market segment effectively. I've documented the specific friction points where existing solutions break down. More importantly, I've maintained relationships with exactly the type of companies we'd target, several of whom have agreed to beta test our platform. Daniel studied me for a moment, then asked the question I'd been dreading. "Why were you at TechVision for 10 years without addressing this opportunity earlier?" I could have fabricated something more professionally palatable, but something told me honesty was crucial with this potential partner. I was married to a TechVision developer who became a product manager. I subordinated my career to support his, believing we were building something together. When I realized that wasn't true, I left both the marriage and the constraints it had placed on my professional ambitions. Daniel's expression remained neutral, but I detected a slight softening around his eyes. That explains the motivation, not the capability. Fair point. I have an MBA with a specialization in marketing technology. Before my career gap, I worked with 3 tech startups on their go-to-market strategies. During my marriage, I maintained freelance clients and continuous professional development. What I lack in recent full-time experience, I make up for in domain knowledge and personal investment in solving this problem. And technical expertise? Minimal, I admitted. I understand the concepts and can communicate effectively with developers, but I can't build this myself. That's why I need a technical co-founder, not just a hired developer. Daniel nodded again, seemingly appreciating the candor. Equity split? 60-40, with me maintaining controlling interest as the founding CEO. 4-year vesting schedule with a 1-year cliff for both of us. Full market rate salary once we secure seed funding, minimal stipend until then. 50-50, Daniel countered immediately. Equal partners, equal risk. I don't work for people, I work with them. I'd anticipated this negotiation point. 50-50, with defined areas of authority. I lead business, marketing, and client relationships. You lead technical architecture, development, and engineering hires. Major decisions require mutual agreement. Daniel extended his hand across the table. I want to see your business plan, financial projections, and competitive analysis. If they're as solid as your negotiating position, we have a deal. 2 days later, Aspect Solutions officially had 2 founders. Daniel's technical brilliance exceeded even my hopeful expectations. He quickly translated my functional specifications into architectural plans, identifying opportunities to differentiate our platform that I hadn't considered. More surprisingly, he embraced the business aspects with unexpected enthusiasm, challenging my assumptions and strengthening our go-to-market strategy. "You're not what I expected," I admitted one evening as we worked late at my apartment-turned-office, takeout containers and whiteboard markers scattered across my dining table. "Because I care about the business model and not just the code?" Daniel asked without looking up from his laptop. "Partly that, but also your willingness to join something this uncertain. My contact said you turned down Google and Amazon." Daniel finally looked up, pushing his glasses into place. "Those offers came with golden handcuffs and predetermined paths. I'd be implementing someone else's vision, optimizing for engagement or consumption or whatever metrics serve the corporate master." He gestured to our shared workspace. "This is harder, but more interesting. We're solving real problems for real businesses, not figuring out how to make people click more ads." With Daniel handling technical development, I focused on securing our first actual clients. The 3 potential beta users I'd mentioned to Ryan remained interested but hesitant, waiting to see something tangible before committing. "We need someone to take a chance on us," I told Daniel after another promising but inconclusive client meeting. "Something beyond goodwill to get them over the line." "What about a free implementation?" Daniel suggested. "First 3 clients? Get the platform at no cost for 6 months in exchange for detailed feedback and case study rights." This approach proved successful. Within 2 weeks, we had signed agreements with 2 marketing agencies and a mid-sized manufacturing company, all willing to test our platform and provide the continuous feedback we needed to refine our offering. With beta clients secured and development underway, we faced our next critical challenge: funding. Our combined personal resources would sustain us for perhaps 3 more months. While we could potentially stretch further through extreme frugality, we needed capital to hire additional developers and build the sales infrastructure necessary for growth. "We should consider applying to Y Combinator or Techstars," Daniel suggested during one of our strategy sessions. "The mentorship would be as valuable as the funding." "The timing doesn't work," I countered, reviewing our cash flow projections. "The next application cycles would leave us with a funding gap. We need bridge capital now to reach those milestones." "Angel investors, then. Do you have connections from your Northwestern network?" I did, but they were mostly tied to Ryan's circles, people who knew me primarily as Ryan Weber's wife, rather than as a founder in my own right. The prospect of approaching them now, so soon after our divorce, filled me with apprehension. "There's another option," I said slowly, an idea forming. TechVision has a client, Meridian Capital. They specialize in marketing technology investments. Ryan always described their partner, Eliza Matsuo, as difficult and overly focused on user experience. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You want to approach an investor your ex-husband complained about?" Ryan's difficult often meant asked challenging questions he couldn't answer, and overly focused on user experience is exactly aligned with our product philosophy. The following week, after intensive preparation and multiple practice sessions, we secured a meeting with Eliza Matsuo. Her office in downtown Chicago projected understated wealth and discernment, contemporary art on the walls, comfortable but not ostentatious furniture, and sweeping views of Lake Michigan. Eliza herself was perhaps 50, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her silver-streaked hair cut in a precise bob. She greeted us with professional warmth, her handshake firm and direct. "Laura Chen and Daniel Okafor," she said, gesturing for us to sit. "Aspect Solutions, marketing automation for the mid-market. Tell me what problem you're solving that isn't already addressed by existing platforms." Her directness was refreshing after weeks of carefully navigating conversations with potential clients and partners. I launched into our pitch, emphasizing the specific pain points we'd identified and how our approach differed fundamentally from scaled-down enterprise solutions. TechVision's Mark Stack requires a dedicated administrator and typically 3 to 6 months of implementation, I explained. Smaller tools like MailChimp or HubSpot Free lack the depth of functionality growing companies need. We're building the platform that grows with our clients, starting with core functionality that delivers immediate value and expanding through modular additions. Eliza listened intently, asking incisive questions about our target market, technical architecture, and go-to-market strategy. When Daniel demonstrated our prototype, focusing on the intuitive interface and simplified workflow, she leaned forward with increased interest. "This looks like what TechVision should have built 3 years ago," she observed. "Why didn't they?" I hesitated, aware of the delicate territory. Enterprise software companies are structured to serve enterprise clients. The complexities they build in are features for their primary market, but barriers for mid-sized companies. It's difficult to simplify once you've committed to complexity. "You worked with TechVision previously?" Eliza asked, her gaze sharp. "I was married to a TechVision product manager," I replied, deciding transparency was the best approach. I observed their product development and client relationships for 10 years before launching Aspect. Eliza's expression shifted subtly, a new understanding registering. "Weber. You were Laura Weber." I nodded, unsure if this connection would help or hurt our chances. "I know Ryan Weber," she said, her tone neutral. "Meridian evaluated TechVision's marketing stack last year when they were courting us as a client." He gave a rather unconvincing presentation about their mid-market strategy. "That would have been the Collins presentation," I said before I could stop myself. "I mean, I believe they were targeting financial services firms of a certain size at that time." Eliza's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're familiar with their client presentations?" I took a deep breath, deciding to own my background completely rather than hide from it. I helped prepare many of Ryan's presentations, including market analyses and competitive positioning. My contributions were not always acknowledged. A flash of something, recognition perhaps, crossed Eliza's face. "Tell me about your beta implementations. How are they progressing?" The rest of the meeting focused on concrete details of our development roadmap, early client feedback, and financial projections. By the time we concluded, I felt cautiously optimistic about our chances. "I'll review your materials with my team," Eliza said as she walked us to the elevator. "Expect our decision within 2 weeks. For what it's worth, I appreciate your direct approach about your TechVision connection. Many founders would have tried to obscure that history." In the elevator descending to the lobby, Daniel and I maintained professional composure. It wasn't until we reached the street that we allowed ourselves to react. "That went well," Daniel said, uncharacteristically. Animated. She was engaged with the technical architecture, really understood the UX differentiators. "She also knows Ryan," I noted, uncertainty creeping in. "That could complicate things." Or not. She didn't seem particularly impressed by him. 12 days later, I received an email from Eliza requesting a follow-up meeting. Daniel and I spent hours preparing for every possible scenario, from a straightforward rejection to detailed term sheet negotiations. What we hadn't prepared for was Eliza's opening statement when we once again sat in her elegant office. "Meridian is prepared to offer $750,000 in seed funding for a 15% equity stake in Aspect Solutions, with standard investor protections and board observation rights." The figure exceeded our best-case projections. I maintained a composed expression while my mind raced through implications. Runway extended to 18 months. Ability to hire 2 more developers immediately. Proper office space instead of my apartment. That's a generous offer, I said carefully. May I ask what specifically interested Meridian about our company? Eliza's smile held a hint of something knowing. 3 factors. First, your platform genuinely addresses a market need we've identified through our portfolio companies. Second, your technical approach is both innovative and pragmatic, difficult balance to achieve. And third, frankly, I've been watching TechVision struggle to serve this market segment for years. I believe you when you say you understand exactly where they've failed. She leaned forward slightly. I also appreciate founders who have something to prove. It creates a certain focused determination that more comfortable entrepreneurs sometimes lack. The perceptiveness of this observation was startling. I hadn't articulated even to myself how much proving Ryan wrong had become a driving motivation. Eliza had identified it immediately. We do have something to prove, I acknowledged. But more importantly, we have something to build, a platform that serves an underserved market exceptionally well. Those motivations aren't mutually exclusive, Eliza noted. Some of the most successful founders I've backed have been fueled by both purpose and a healthy desire to prove doubters wrong. We spent the next hour discussing terms, expectations, and next steps. By the meeting's conclusion, we had a handshake. Agreement on Meridian's investment, with formal paperwork to follow within days. Outside Meridian's offices, Daniel and I allowed ourselves the celebration we'd restrained during the meeting. Our elation was part relief, part validation, part genuine excitement for the path ahead now that funding was secured. We should find office space immediately, Daniel said as we walked toward the L station. My apartment is even smaller than yours, and we need room for the new hires. Already researching options, I replied, scrolling through a real estate app on my phone. There's a co-working space in West Loop with private offices available. We could start there while looking for something more permanent. Always 3 steps ahead, Daniel observed with approval. That's why you're CEO. The validation from my co-founder, small as it was, affected me more deeply than I expected. After years of having my professional capabilities dismissed or minimized by Ryan, simple acknowledgement of my leadership felt profoundly affirming. With Meridian's investment finalized, Aspect Solutions accelerated rapidly. We secured office space in a renovated industrial building in West Loop, its exposed brick and abundant natural light, creating an environment that energized our growing team. Daniel recruited 2 talented developers from his university network, while I hired a client success manager to ensure our beta implementations delivered measurable value. The following months passed in a blur of product development, client feedback cycles, and strategic planning. Our platform evolved rapidly, incorporating insights from our beta users while maintaining the clarity and simplicity that differentiated us from competitors. By the 6-month mark, all 3 beta clients had converted to paying customers, providing both revenue and compelling case studies for our sales efforts. Perhaps most significantly, I began establishing myself within Chicago's tech community not as Ryan Weber's former wife, but as the founder and CEO of a promising startup. Speaking engagements at industry events, feature articles in local business publications, and growing social media presence all contributed to this new professional identity. One evening, returning to the office after a particularly successful client meeting, I found Daniel still working despite the late hour. We got Data Point Solutions, I announced, unable to contain my excitement. Annual contract, premium tier, implementation starting next month. Daniel looked up from his monitor, genuine pleasure breaking through his usual reserved demeanor. That's huge. They're exactly our target profile, and they have significant growth potential. And they're leaving TechVision to come to us, I added, the significance not lost on either of us. DataPoint wasn't just any client. They were a TechVision reference account that Ryan had personally managed. Their decision to switch to Aspect represented more than revenue. It was validation of our entire business thesis. "This calls for celebration," Daniel declared, reaching into his desk drawer and producing a bottle of champagne he'd apparently been saving for just such an occasion. As we toasted our success, I felt a moment of perfect clarity. 9 months. After walking away from my marriage and the constraints it had placed on my ambitions, I was leading a funded startup with growing market traction and a product users genuinely appreciated. The path hadn't been easy or straightforward, but each challenge had reinforced my conviction that I'd made the right choice. "To data point," Daniel said, raising his paper cup of champagne, "and to whatever's coming next." What came next arrived sooner than either of us anticipated. The following morning, I received an email from Eliza Matsuo that would fundamentally alter our trajectory. TechCrunch Disrupt is accepting startup battlefield applications for their Chicago event. The message read, "Meridian would strongly support Aspect's participation. Significant visibility opportunity with potential investors for your inevitable Series A. Let's discuss." TechCrunch Disrupt was among the most prestigious startup competitions, with participating companies receiving intense media coverage and investor attention. Being selected would catapult Aspect from promising local startup to nationally recognized contender. It would also, inevitably, bring me directly into Ryan's professional orbit. TechVision regularly sponsored these events, with senior leadership attending and often speaking on industry panels. For a brief moment, I considered declining the opportunity, unwilling to expose myself to potential awkwardness or confrontation. The thought lasted exactly 3 seconds before my competitive instinct overrode it completely. "We'll apply immediately," I wrote back to Eliza. "Thank you for suggesting it." When our acceptance to the TechCrunch Disrupt battlefield came through, 6 weeks later, it triggered a new phase of intensity for our team. Preparing our demonstration, refining our pitch, and ensuring our platform could withstand the scrutiny of industry experts consumed every waking hour. The night before the event, I stood alone in our office, reviewing our presentation one final time. On the whiteboard behind my desk, I'd written our core value proposition, the message we'd be delivering to hundreds of investors, journalists, and industry leaders the following day. Enterprise capability, small business usability, Aspect Solutions bridges the gap. Staring at those words, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in what we'd built, nervous anticipation about the competition, and yes, a certain satisfaction at how far I'd come from just a housewife with opinions. Tomorrow would mark my official emergence as a founder and CEO on a significant industry stage. Whatever happened in the competition, that transformation alone represented a victory worth acknowledging. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Everything ready for tomorrow?" "As ready as we'll ever be," I replied. "Get some sleep. Big day ahead." "You too," came his response. "Though I'm guessing you'll be up refining the pitch until midnight." I smiled at how well my co-founder had come to know me in just 9 months. He was right, of course. Sleep could wait. Right now, there was work to do. The work of becoming someone Ryan Weber never imagined I could be. The McCormick Place Convention Center hummed with the distinctive energy of TechCrunch Disrupt, equal parts networking frenzy, competitive tension, and technological optimism. Startup founders with sleep-deprived eyes clutched coffee cups while rehearsing pitches under their breath. Investors moved through the space with deliberate casualness, already evaluating which companies merited their attention. Journalists scanned the exhibition area for compelling narratives among the dozens of hopeful ventures. I stood at the entrance to the main hall, taking a moment to steady myself before stepping into the controlled chaos. My navy blue dress and structured blazer, selected with meticulous care for this moment, felt like armor. Professional, polished, but distinctive enough to stand out in the inevitable group photos. The sapphire pendant at my throat caught the light as I took a deep breath, centering myself. "There you are," Daniel said, appearing at my side with 2 coffee cups. He handed one to me, his expression a mixture of excitement and nerves usually hidden beneath his composed exterior. "I've checked the booth. Everything's ready for demonstrations after the pitch competition." "How many sign-ups for demo slots so far?" I asked, sipping the coffee gratefully. 17 already, including representatives from Morgan Stanley and Adobe. Word is spreading that we're one to watch. This early interest validated weeks of careful preparation. Beyond perfecting our pitch for the competition, we'd developed a comprehensive show strategy, targeted outreach to potential investors and clients, a schedule of demonstrations that highlighted our platform's strengths, and messaging that positioned Aspect Solutions as the inevitable evolution of marketing automation. "Battlefield participants, please proceed to the preparation area," announced a voice over the PA system. "Competition begins in 30 minutes. The Startup Battlefield, TechCrunch's flagship competition, was structured as a crucible. 20 companies would present to a panel of industry judges, with only 5 advancing to the final round. The winner would receive $100,000 in funding, but the real prize was the visibility and credibility that came with recognition on this stage. "Let's do this," I said to Daniel, straightening my shoulders. We made our way through the crowded exhibition hall toward the backstage area, navigating around product demonstrations and impromptu meetings. Halfway across the hall, I froze. Standing no more than 20 feet away, surrounded by a group of attendees, was Ryan. He looked essentially unchanged from when I'd last seen him. Same carefully styled hair, same confident posture, same aura of self-assurance. The TechVision logo featured prominently on the banner behind him. "Problem?" Daniel asked, following my gaze. "My ex-husband," I explained quietly. "At the TechVision booth." Daniel nodded once, understanding the significance. "Want to go another way?" I considered the question, feeling the momentary impulse to avoid, to take the longer route around the perimeter of the hall. The impulse lasted precisely 3 seconds before I dismissed it. "No," I said firmly. "This is a professional event, and we're professionals. We'll go directly to the preparation area." As we approached the TechVision booth, Ryan's animated conversation with potential clients faltered. His eyes met mine, widening slightly in recognition and something that might have been surprise. I maintained a neutral expression, offering a small professional nod, the kind of acknowledgement you'd give any industry colleague, neither friendly nor hostile. Ryan's nod in return was stiff, his composure momentarily disrupted. As we passed, I heard his conversation resume with a slightly altered rhythm, as if he was working to recapture his train of thought. "Well handled," Daniel murmured as we continued, toward the preparation area. I appreciated his support, but was more interested in my own reaction. The encounter that I'd been rehearsing mentally for weeks, fearing perhaps that it might unsettle me at a critical moment, had proven remarkably anticlimactic. Ryan was just another competitor in a hall full of them, no longer the defining presence in my life. Backstage, the preparation area buzzed with focused energy as presenting companies made final adjustments to demos and practiced key talking points. A TechCrunch coordinator approached us with tablets and microphones. "Aspect Solutions, you're 8th in the lineup. 15 minutes to prepare, 6 minutes to present, 4 minutes for judges' questions. Good luck." As we waited, I observed our competition. Everything from cryptocurrency platforms to healthcare applications to enterprise security solutions. The diversity of innovations was impressive, though I noted with satisfaction that no other company was addressing our specific market segment. "Aspect Solutions, you're on deck," called the stage manager eventually. "Please proceed to the entrance." Standing in the wings of the main stage, Watching the company ahead of us field difficult questions from the judges, I felt a sudden wave of clarity. Less than a year ago, I had been defining myself in relation to Ryan, his wife, his support system, the woman behind his success. Now I stood on the precipice of professional recognition entirely my own, about to present a company built from my vision and perseverance. Aspect Solutions. Please welcome to the stage CEO Laura Chen and CTO Daniel Okafor. The lights of the main stage were brighter than I'd anticipated, momentarily disorienting as we walked to the center mark. Below us, the judges' panel, 4 industry veterans with reputations for incisive questioning, studied us with professional interest. Beyond them, an audience of several hundred investors, journalists, and tech professionals waited to evaluate our offering. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady and clear. "Marketing automation has a problem. Enterprise solutions are too complex for mid-market companies. Small business tools are too limited for growing organizations. Aspect Solutions bridges this gap with a platform specifically designed for companies in transition. Sophisticated enough to handle complex marketing workflows, but intuitive enough to implement without specialized administrators." Over the next 5 minutes, Daniel and I moved through our carefully crafted presentation. I outlined the market opportunity and customer pain points, while Daniel demonstrated key platform features. We presented case studies from our early adopters, emphasizing measurable improvements in campaign performance and operational efficiency. The mid-market represents a $2 billion opportunity that current solutions are failing to address effectively, I concluded. With Aspect's purpose-built platform, these companies no longer need to choose between simplicity and capability. They can have both. The judges' questions began immediately, probing our technical architecture, go-to-market strategy, and competitive differentiation. When the most technical judge challenged our approach to data integration, Daniel responded, with such command of the subject that even the skeptical questioner nodded with approval. The final question came from Patricia Gonzalez, a veteran investor known for identifying breakout SaaS companies. "Your approach is compelling," she acknowledged, "but established players like TechVision will inevitably move downstream to capture this market. What's your defensive strategy?" I had anticipated this question, knowing TechVision's presence at the event made it particularly relevant. Enterprise software companies are structured around enterprise needs, complex implementations, dedicated administrators, and feature-rich environments, I replied. When they attempt to move down market, they typically create streamlined versions of their enterprise products rather than solutions built specifically for mid-market requirements. This approach fundamentally misunderstands what these customers need. I paused, aware that somewhere in the audience, Ryan was likely listening to this direct challenge to TechVision's strategy, the very approach he had championed and that I had questioned during our marriage. Aspect was designed from the ground up to serve this specific market. Our entire architecture, from technical infrastructure to user experience, is optimized for these customers. Enterprise companies attempting to capture this segment would need to essentially create separate products, something their structure and economics make extremely difficult. Patricia nodded, apparently satisfied with the response. "Thank you. Good luck." As we exited the stage to polite applause, I felt the peculiar mixture of relief and adrenaline that follows any high-stakes performance. We had delivered our message clearly and handled the questioning with confidence. Whether it would be enough to advance to the finals remained to be seen. "Nailed it," Daniel said quietly as we made our way back to the exhibition hall. "Especially the TechVision question." "I've been preparing for that one for months," I admitted. "Speaking of which, we should head to our booth. Word will spread quickly after the pitch." Daniel was right. Our presentation had generated immediate interest, with our demonstration schedule filling completely within an hour. Investors, potential clients, and curious competitors flowed through our booth in waves. I presented our platform dozens of times, my voice growing slightly hoarse but my enthusiasm undiminished. During a rare lull in the afternoon, Eliza Matsuo appeared at our booth, her expression inscrutable. "Strong presentation," she said without preamble. "You've drawn significant attention. 3 Meridian portfolio companies have already asked for introductions." "Thank you for encouraging us to apply," I replied. "The response has been overwhelming." Eliza nodded, then lowered her voice slightly. "You should know that Ryan Weber approached me after your pitch. He seemed quite interested in who had backed Aspect." "This was unexpected. What did you tell him?" "That Meridian makes investments based on market opportunity and founder capability," she said with a slight smile, "and that we find the mid-market automation space particularly compelling." Before I could respond, a notification appeared on my phone, a message from the TechCrunch organizers. I glanced at it, then looked up at Daniel and Eliza with carefully controlled excitement. "We've advanced to the finals." The news spread quickly through the exhibition hall. Suddenly, our booth had renewed energy, with additional visitors eager to see the platform that had impressed the notoriously demanding judges. Among the stream of well-wishers and interested parties, I spotted a familiar face, Carol Winters, TechVision's head of product marketing, whom I'd met several times during company events when married to Ryan. "Laura," she said warmly, approaching with genuine enthusiasm. "Congratulations on making the finals. Your platform looks impressive." "Thank you, Carol," I replied, surprised by her friendly approach. "It's good to see you." She glanced around to ensure we weren't overheard, then lowered her voice. "I wanted you to know that many of us at TechVision have been following Aspect with interest. Your focus on the mid-market is something some of us have advocated for internally without success. The implicit criticism of TechVision's strategy wasn't lost on me." "Too enterprise-focused?" Carol nodded. "Exactly. Ryan's team keeps pushing features that our larger clients request, while our mid-sized customers struggle with basic implementation. Your approach makes complete sense to those of us working directly with customers. This unexpected alliance was illuminating. I had assumed everyone at TechVision would view Aspect as unwelcome competition. Instead, it seemed some recognized the validity of our approach, perhaps even saw our success as vindication of their own perspectives. "I appreciate you saying that," I said sincerely. "If you ever want to discuss the space more thoroughly, I'd welcome the conversation." Carol smiled knowingly. "I just might take you up on that. Good luck in the finals." As she walked away, Daniel rejoined me after speaking with a potential client. "Was that TechVision's marketing director?" "Head of product marketing," I corrected. "And apparently an Aspect admirer." "Interesting," Daniel observed. "Corporate politics are fascinating from the outside." The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur of demonstrations, discussions, and preparations for the final round. By evening, when the exhibition hall closed to transition for the finals and subsequent reception, I was simultaneously exhausted and energized, running on adrenaline and the undeniable validation of the day's responses. The finals would bring additional pressure, a larger audience, more pointed questions, and higher stakes as only one company would be named the overall winner. As Daniel and I retreated to a quiet corner to refine our presentation, I received a text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on advancing to the finals. Your pitch was compelling. We should talk after the competition. Ryan." I stared at the message, unsure how to interpret its tone. Was it professional courtesy from one tech executive to another? A tentative olive branch from an ex-husband? Or something more calculated, perhaps an attempt to gather intelligence on a new competitor? After consideration, I opted for a response that was professional yet non-committal. "Thank you. My schedule is quite full, but I appreciate the good wishes." Setting aside personal complications, I refocused on our finals preparation. The evening session would feature only the 5 advancing companies, each receiving 8 minutes to present, and 6 minutes for questions. The judging panel would be expanded to include 2 additional industry luminaries, increasing both the pressure and potential exposure. When we returned to the main hall for the finals, the atmosphere had transformed. The casual bustle of the daytime exhibition had given way to a more formal setup, with the audience now seated theater-style facing the main stage. Lighting had been adjusted to create a more dramatic presentation environment, and a large screen displayed the TechCrunch Disrupt logo alongside the names of the finalist companies. Backstage, the finalists maintained a respectful distance from one another. Each team focused on their own final preparations. As the first company was called to present, I glimpsed the audience from the wings. In the front row sat the expanded panel of judges. Behind them, several hundred attendees filled the seats, including prominent investors, industry analysts, and media representatives. My attention was drawn to a familiar figure seated about 10 rows back. Ryan, his expression concentrated as he watched the first presentation. Beside him sat Greg Davidson, TechVision's chief technology officer, both men taking notes occasionally. Their presence underscored the strategic interest our largest potential competitor had in the proceedings. Aspect Solutions, please take the stage. Our final presentation built upon our earlier pitch, emphasizing the aspects that had resonated most strongly with the judges. I opened with a customer story that illustrated the precise problem we were solving, making the market opportunity concrete rather than theoretical. Daniel's demonstration focused on our unique approach to data integration, the very feature that had drawn technical questions in the preliminary round. The expanded judging panel was even more rigorous in their questioning, probing our customer acquisition strategy, technical scalability, and long-term competitive positioning. When Patricia Gonzalez returned to the theme of established competitors, I was prepared with enhanced data. Enterprise solutions like TechVision's require an average of 4 full-time equivalent staff to implement and maintain, I explained, citing research we'd conducted. For mid-market companies with limited resources, this represents an insurmountable barrier. Aspect requires less than 1 FTE, making sophisticated marketing automation accessible to companies previously locked out of this capability. The final question came from Marcus Lee, a renowned product strategist who had joined the expanded panel. Your platform is impressive, but what's to prevent a company like TechVision from simply acquiring Aspect and incorporating your approach into their suite? The question sent a ripple through the audience, direct acknowledgement of the most obvious exit strategy for a company in our position. I could almost feel Ryan's attention intensify from his place in the audience. Acquisition is always a theoretical possibility in the technology sector, I acknowledged. However, Aspect Solutions was founded specifically because existing approaches weren't serving this market segment effectively. Our mission is to build a company that addresses this need. Comprehensively and independently, we believe we can create more value for customers and shareholders by executing our vision than by becoming a feature in a larger platform. As we left the stage, I felt confident in our performance, but genuinely uncertain about the outcome. Each finalist had presented compelling technology addressing significant market opportunities. The judge's decision would come down to subtle evaluations of market size, execution capability, and potential impact. During the deliberation break, attendees mingled in the exhibition area where drinks and light refreshments were served. Daniel and I were approached continuously by investors, potential partners, and journalists, each conversation reaffirming the positive reception to our presentation regardless of the final result. I was speaking with a journalist from TechCrunch when I became aware of Ryan approaching our group. The reporter, sensing an interesting dynamic, excused herself with a promise to reconnect later. "Strong final presentation," Ryan said, maintaining a professional tone despite the obvious personal history between us. "The mid-market focus is compelling." "Thank you," I replied neutrally. "It's an underserved segment with significant pain points." An awkward pause followed as we both navigated the strange territory between our personal past and professional present. Ryan broke the silence first. Your text suggested your schedule is full, but I was hoping we might find time to discuss potential synergies. TechVision has been re-evaluating our mid-market approach. The subtext was clear. He was suggesting a business conversation that might lead to partnership or acquisition discussions. It represented tacit acknowledgement that Aspect had identified, a legitimate opportunity that TechVision had missed. We're always open to discussions that could benefit our customers, I replied carefully. Though our focus currently is on building and scaling independently. Ryan nodded, accepting the diplomatic deflection. Understandable. Still, if you're willing, I think a conversation could be valuable for both companies. Before I could respond, the announcement came that the judges had reached their decision. Attendees began moving back toward the main seating area for the final announcement. We should continue this another time, I said, grateful for the interruption. I'll reach out next week, Ryan replied, his tone suggesting he interpreted my response as more positive than intended. As we gathered on stage with the other finalists, I found myself in the surreal position of standing under the spotlights, awaiting a judgment that could substantially impact Aspect's trajectory, while my ex-husband sat in the audience contemplating how to potentially acquire or neutralize the company I had built after leaving him. The head judge approached the microphone, thanking all participants before beginning his comments on each finalist. The evaluations were thoughtful and specific, highlighting the strengths and potential challenges for each company. When he reached Aspect Solutions, his praise was particularly focused on our clarity of vision and execution to date. Each of these finalists represents tremendous innovation and potential, he concluded. However, the judges have unanimously selected one company that we believe has identified a significant market opportunity and demonstrated exceptional capability to address it. The pause stretched dramatically as he opened an envelope containing the result. The winner of TechCrunch Disrupt Chicago is Aspect Solutions. The announcement triggered immediate applause as spotlights focused on Daniel and me. We stepped forward to accept the oversized check and trophy, the tangible symbols of recognition that would translate into invaluable market credibility. At the microphone, I kept my acceptance brief and focused, thanking the judges, acknowledging our team and early customers, and emphasizing our commitment to addressing the specific needs of our target market. As I spoke, I was acutely aware of Ryan in the audience, watching this definitive validation of the vision he had dismissed when we were married. The formal proceedings concluded with photographs and congratulations from the judges and TechCrunch organizers. As we moved to the reception that followed, Aspect was immediately the center of attention, with a constant stream of well-wishers and interested parties seeking to connect. Eliza approached with genuine pleasure, evident in her typically reserved demeanor. This validation exceeds even our optimistic projections, she noted. Prepare for an influx of interest from both clients and potential investors. We're already seeing it, I confirmed, nodding toward the group of investors waiting nearby to speak with us. We'll need to be strategic about which opportunities to pursue. Meridian will support whatever direction you choose, Eliza assured me, though I expect TechVision is already formulating their response strategy. As if summoned by her comment, I noticed Ryan in conversation with a group of TechVision executives across the room, their expressions serious as they glanced occasionally in our direction. The competition had just become significantly more concrete. For them, no longer a theoretical concern, but a recognized threat from a company with momentum and market validation. The evening continued with a whirlwind of introductions, conversations, and potential opportunities. Around midnight, as the event finally wound down, Daniel and I found ourselves alone for the first time since the announcement. So, he said, with uncharacteristic emotion in his voice, we actually won. We won, I confirmed, the reality still somewhat surreal. More importantly, We proved the market exists and that our approach resonates. Daniel nodded, then asked the question that had been implicit throughout the evening. What about TechVision? Ryan seemed quite interested in synergies. I considered the question carefully. They'll probably make an acquisition offer within 3 months. The question is whether we entertain it or continue independently. And do we? Daniel asked directly. That depends on the offer and our situation when it comes, I replied honestly. But my instinct is to build something substantial first. We've only scratched the surface of what Aspect can become. As we walked toward the exit, I reflected on the day's trajectory. From nervously entering the convention center that morning, to leaving as recognized innovators and competition winners. The journey from just a housewife with opinions to award-winning CEO had been challenging, exhausting, and ultimately transformative. Outside the convention center, the Chicago night was clear and cool, the city skyline illuminated against the darkness. I paused for a moment, looking up at the buildings reaching toward the sky, each representing someone's vision made concrete through persistence and belief. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked, observing my momentary contemplation. "That today marks a beginning, not an end point," I replied. "We've validated our concept, but now comes the harder part, building something truly substantial and enduring." Daniel nodded in agreement. "So tomorrow we get back to work." "Tomorrow we get back to work," I confirmed. "With significantly more momentum but the same fundamental mission, creating the platform these companies actually need, not what someone else thinks they should want." As we parted ways, I thought about the text from Ryan and his approach during the reception. There was a certain symmetry to the situation. The man who had dismissed my business insights now seeking to acquire the company built from those very insights. Whatever TechVision offered, however, would be evaluated solely on its merits, without the emotional complications that had once clouded my judgment. The Aspect that had advanced to the finals and won the competition was fundamentally different from the company I had first envisioned when leaving my marriage. It had evolved through collaboration with Daniel, feedback from our early customers, and the continuous refinement of our vision. It had become something more substantial than a vehicle for personal vindication, a genuinely valuable solution addressing real market needs. As my rideshare approached my apartment building, my phone buzzed with a notification. TechCrunch had already published their coverage of the competition, with the headline, "Aspect Solutions Disrupts Marketing Automation with Mid-Market Focus, Takes Top Prize." The article included quotes from the judges praising our approach and highlighted the significant market opportunity we had identified. The final paragraph noted, "Industry observers speculate that Aspect's success may trigger responses from established players like TechVision, whether through competitive offerings or potential acquisition approaches." I smiled at the journalist's insight. Whatever came next, competition, acquisition offers, or continued independent growth, the company I had built from the ashes of my marriage had undeniably established itself as a force to be reckoned with. Not bad for someone once dismissed as just a housewife with opinions. The Monday following TechCrunch Disrupt transformed our office. What had been a focused but relatively quiet workspace became the epicenter of intense activity. The oversized winner's check hung prominently on the exposed brick wall, less for the monetary value it represented than the validation it conferred. Beneath it, a constantly expanding bulletin board displayed media coverage of our victory, each headline reinforcing our emergence as significant players in the marketing technology landscape. Our inboxes overflowed with meeting requests from investors, potential clients, job seekers, and partnership inquiries. Diane, our newly hired office manager, created a triage system to categorize and prioritize the deluge, but even with her efficiency, we struggled to manage the sudden attention. "We need to expand the team immediately," I told Daniel during our morning strategy session. The current implementation schedule is already stretching our resources, and these new inquiries could double our client base within weeks. Daniel nodded, scrolling through his own crowded inbox. I've identified 3 developer candidates from my network who could start quickly. We also need a dedicated product manager and at least 2 more client success specialists. Approved, I said without hesitation. And I'll accelerate the marketing director search. We've been handling it ourselves, but with this growth trajectory, we need dedicated leadership in that function. This rapid scaling created both opportunity and risk. Every hire represented not just additional capacity, but a cultural decision. Each person would help define what Aspect Solutions would become as it grew beyond its founding team. By Wednesday, we had secured temporary space on another floor of our building to accommodate the expansion. I spent the afternoon interviewing product manager candidates while Daniel conducted technical assessments for the developer roles. Between interviews, I recorded a podcast about women in technology and female founders, fielded calls from journalists seeking follow-up stories, and reviewed term sheets from 2 venture capital firms interested in leading our Series A round. The pace was exhilarating but potentially unsustainable. That evening, as the office finally quieted, I found myself alone at my desk, simultaneously energized by our momentum and concerned about maintaining focus amid the whirlwind. My phone rang. Eliza Matsuo calling. As our primary investor, she had been notably restrained in her communications since the competition, sending a brief congratulatory message but otherwise allowing us space to navigate the immediate aftermath. "Laura, how are you managing the circus?" she asked without preamble when I answered. I laughed, appreciating her directness. "Organized chaos. We're scaling the team, fielding investor interest, and trying to maintain focus on our client implementations." "Exactly why I'm calling," Eliza replied. "This inflection point requires strategic discipline. I've seen promising companies derailed by post-competition euphoria, chasing every opportunity until they lose sight of their core mission." Her concern was valid. The sudden attention created a temptation to pursue multiple directions simultaneously: enterprise expansions, international opportunities, adjacent product offerings, each representing potential growth but also potential dilution of our focus. "We're maintaining our mid-market concentration," I assured her. "New client acquisitions are strictly within our target profile, and product development remains focused on our core platform capabilities." "Good," Eliza said, approval evident in her tone. "And the TechVision situation? Any formal approach? Yet?" "Nothing official, though Ryan has sent 3 messages suggesting a strategic conversation," I replied, keeping my tone neutral despite the complex emotions these communications triggered. Eliza made a non-committal sound. "They're assessing their options." My sources indicate significant internal debate about how to respond to Aspect. Some executives favor developing a competitive offering, others advocate for an acquisition approach. This insight into TechVision's internal deliberations was valuable but unsurprising. As the incumbent player with significant resources, they had multiple potential responses to our emergence. "What would you advise if they make an offer?" I asked, genuinely curious about Eliza's perspective. She paused, considering the question. "That depends entirely on the terms and timing. Acquisition could provide accelerated growth and resources, but potentially at the cost of your vision's integrity. Independence preserves control, but introduces competitive challenges against a well-resourced opponent." "Not to mention the personal complexity," I acknowledged. "Yes," Eliza agreed, her tone softening slightly. "That's an additional dimension, unique to your situation. Have you determined how you'll handle direct negotiations with your ex-husband if it comes to that?" The question cut to the heart of an issue I'd been deliberately avoiding. Any serious acquisition discussions would necessarily involve Ryan as TechVision's VP of Product. The prospect of sitting across a negotiation table from him discussing the value of the company I had built after our marriage ended, carried emotional complications I couldn't entirely dismiss. "I'll handle it professionally," I said, with more confidence than I felt. "Personal history aside, any discussions will be evaluated solely on business merit." "I'd expect nothing less," Eliza replied. "Just remember that you negotiate from a position of strength. TechCrunch was merely public validation of what we already knew. Aspect has identified and addressed a significant market opportunity that larger players missed." After ending the call, I remained at my desk, contemplating the path forward. The validation and opportunities flowing from our victory were unquestionably positive, but they also introduced new pressures and complexities. Maintaining our core focus while managing growth would require discipline and clarity, particularly if TechVision moved from informal overtures to a formal acquisition approach. The following morning, an email arrived from Ryan, more formal than his previous messages. "Laura, TechVision's executive team would like to discuss potential strategic collaboration between our companies. We believe there may be significant mutual benefit in exploring how our complementary offerings could address broader market needs. Would you be available for an initial conversation next week? We could meet at a neutral location of your choosing. Regards, Ryan Weber, VP of Product, TechVision." The carefully worded message avoided explicit mention of acquisition, but the subtext was clear. After consultation with Daniel and our advisory board, I crafted an equally measured response. "Ryan, thank you for your interest in Aspect Solutions. We're currently focused on scaling our platform and client implementations following our recent growth. While we remain open to discussions that could benefit our customers, our immediate priorities are on executing our independent roadmap." That said, I could make time for a preliminary conversation in 2-3 weeks. Once our current expansion initiatives are further along, I'll have my office reach out to coordinate when my schedule permits. Best regards, Laura Chen, CEO, Aspect Solutions. The response established appropriate professional boundaries while leaving the door open for future discussions. It also bought valuable time, weeks during which we could continue building our market position and team before engaging with a potential acquirer. This decision to delay substantive discussions with TechVision proved fortuitous. The following days brought an unexpected development that significantly altered the competitive landscape. Carol Winters, TechVision's head of product marketing, who had approached me at our booth during Disrupt, reached out through a personal email. "Laura, I hope this finds you well following your impressive showing at TechCrunch. I wanted to give you a confidential heads up that I've resigned from TechVision, effective next week." After our conversation at Disrupt, I realized how aligned my product philosophy is with Aspect's approach. If you're expanding your marketing leadership, I'd welcome a conversation about potential opportunities. I bring extensive experience in the space and intimate knowledge of the enterprise market's limitations for mid-sized clients. Regardless of your interest, please keep my departure confidential until it's officially announced. Best, Carol. This unexpected opportunity required careful consideration. Carol's experience and market knowledge would be invaluable additions to our team. However, hiring a senior TechVision executive could be perceived as deliberately antagonistic, potentially complicating any future discussions with them while creating additional personal dynamics with Ryan. After discussing the situation with Daniel, I decided to meet with Carol before making any decisions. We arranged a discreet coffee at a small cafe far from both companies' offices. Carol arrived looking both nervous and excited, the characteristic demeanor of someone making a significant career transition. "Thank you for meeting," she said, as we settled at a corner table. "I realize the timing and circumstances are somewhat delicate." "They are," I acknowledged. "I appreciate the courtesy of your advance notice. May I ask what prompted your decision to leave TechVision?" Carol sighed, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "A culmination of frustrations, honestly. I've spent 3 years advocating for a more accessible approach for mid-market clients. When I saw your platform at Disrupt, it was the tangible demonstration of everything I'd been pushing for internally. And Ryan's team wasn't receptive to that direction? I asked, careful to maintain a professional tone. Ryan specifically was the biggest obstacle, Carol said, a hint of frustration evident. He's convinced the future is in more complex features for enterprise clients, not simplification for mid-market adoption. Your success has created some internal tension, but hasn't fundamentally changed his position. This insight into TechVision's internal dynamics was valuable regardless of whether we hired Carol. It suggested that despite Ryan's outreach, there remained significant resistance to the direction Aspect represented. What would you hope to accomplish at Aspect? I asked, moving the conversation toward her potential contribution. Carol's expression brightened. To build marketing strategies that actually address what these mid-market companies need, not what enterprise software executives think they should want. I've spent years documenting these clients' challenges, but haven't been able to address them within TechVision's framework. Our conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, exploring Carol's experience, vision for marketing in our segment, and understanding of the competitive landscape. By the time we parted, I had made my decision. I'd like you to meet with Daniel and our leadership team next week, I told her as we prepared to leave. Your experience and perspective would be valuable additions to Aspect at this growth stage. Carol's relief was visible. Thank you. And regarding the TechVision connection, I understand the potential sensitivity. We'll navigate it professionally, I assured her. Aspect is focused on building the best solution for our target market. Your insights will help us do that more effectively. 2 weeks later, Carol joined Aspect Solutions as our Chief Marketing Officer. Her arrival coincided with the completion of our initial expansion, bringing our team to 28 people, a substantial growth from the 5-person operation that had entered TechCrunch Disrupt. Her first major contribution was developing a comprehensive competitive analysis that identified specific gaps in TechVision's offering that Aspect could exploit. More importantly, she helped articulate our value proposition with a clarity that resonated deeply with mid-market prospects. Client acquisition accelerated further, with conversion rates from demonstrations to signed contracts reaching 62%, nearly triple the industry average. With Carol's transition complete and our expanded team settling into effective operations, I finally agreed to the meeting Ryan had been requesting. We arranged to meet at a restaurant equidistant from our respective offices, neutral territory for what promised to be a complex conversation. I arrived early, deliberately selecting a table with good sightlines and sufficient privacy for a business discussion. When Ryan entered precisely on time, I observed him with professional detachment. His expression registered momentary surprise at finding me already seated and prepared, as if he had expected to establish the dynamic by arriving first. "Laura," he said, extending his hand as he reached the table. "Thank you for making time." "Ryan," I replied, accepting the handshake, briefly. "I understand you wanted to discuss potential collaboration." He nodded, settling into his chair. Aspect has clearly identified a legitimate market opportunity. Your success at Disrupt only confirmed what the client response was already indicating. "And now TechVision is interested in that market segment?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Ryan smiled slightly, a familiar expression that once would have seemed charming, but now registered as calculated. "We've always been interested in the mid-market. The question has been how best to serve it. Through acquisition rather than internal development?" I suggested, cutting to the implicit purpose of our meeting. He nodded, acknowledging my directness. "That's one option under consideration." Aspect has built impressive momentum and brand recognition in a relatively short time. Combining that with TechVision's resources and enterprise expertise could create significant value. "For whom?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. For everyone involved, Ryan replied without hesitation. For mid-market clients, who would benefit from a more robust solution. For TechVision shareholders who would see expanded market reach. And for Aspect's team, who would gain the resources to scale more rapidly than possible independently. His presentation was polished and logical, focusing exclusively on business rationale without reference to our personal history. I found myself both impressed by his professionalism and slightly amused by his careful avoidance of the obvious subtext that he was essentially proposing to acquire the company I had built after leaving our marriage. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked, maintaining the strictly business framework he had established. An exploratory process, Ryan said, leaning forward slightly. Our executive team would like to engage in preliminary discussions about potential acquisition terms. We believe Aspect would be more valuable as part of TechVision than as an independent entity. I considered his proposal carefully before responding. And what role do you envision for Aspect's leadership in this scenario? You and Daniel would be valuable additions to TechVision's product organization, Ryan replied, though I noted he didn't specify reporting structures or exact roles. Your vision and execution capability would be assets to our broader strategy. The conversation continued in this vein for nearly an hour, Ryan outlining the theoretical benefits of acquisition, while I asked pointed questions about valuation approaches, integration strategies, and product autonomy. Throughout, we maintained the pretense that this was a standard business discussion between unconnected parties, neither acknowledging the personal complexity underlying the interaction. As we prepared to leave, Ryan finally broached the subject, obliquely. I realize this situation has certain additional dimensions. I want to assure you that my interest is purely professional. Aspect has built something valuable that aligns with TechVision's strategic direction. I appreciate that clarification, I replied evenly. Any discussions would indeed be evaluated solely on business merit. Personal history is irrelevant to that assessment. Ryan nodded, seemingly relieved by my response. So you're open to continuing the conversation? I'm open to receiving a formal expression of interest that our board can evaluate, I said, establishing appropriate corporate governance around any potential transaction. If TechVision wishes to proceed, you should direct that communication to me officially, and will engage appropriate advisors to assess it. I'll convey that to our team, Ryan confirmed as we parted ways. The meeting left me with conflicted feelings. Professionally, TechVision's interest validated our market position and growth potential. Their resources could indeed accelerate Aspect's development in ways that would be challenging to match independently. Yet the prospect of reintegrating my company and myself into an organization connected to Ryan raised complex personal considerations. Back at our office, I briefed Daniel and Carol on the conversation. They're serious about acquisition, I concluded, though no specific terms or valuation were discussed. How do you feel about it? Daniel asked directly, always focused on the human element beneath business decisions. I considered the question carefully. Professionally, it's validation worth considering. Personally, complicated. We have alternatives, Carol reminded us. The Series A interest remains strong, and our client acquisition metrics would support a substantial valuation. True, I acknowledged, but TechVision's distribution channels and existing client relationships could accelerate our growth significantly. At what cost? Daniel asked, the fundamental question underlying any acquisition discussion. Not just financial terms, but vision, autonomy, and culture. This question would frame our evaluation of whatever formal offer emerged. The following week, TechVision's CEO sent an official letter outlining preliminary acquisition interest, suggesting a valuation range of $25 to $30 million. The letter proposed a due diligence process and indicated willingness to discuss leadership roles and product autonomy as part of the negotiation. Upon receiving this communication, I engaged Sophie Martinez, a respected M&A advisor specializing in technology transactions. In our initial consultation, she assessed TechVision's approach with clinical precision. The valuation range is conservative, considering your growth metrics and market position, Sophie observed. They're testing your receptiveness without showing their full hand. What would be a reasonable range based on comparable transactions? I asked. Given your traction and the strategic value to TechVision specifically, closer to $40–45 million would be justified, she replied. Possibly higher with performance incentives. We discussed potential negotiation strategies, integration considerations, and alternatives to outright acquisition, including minority investment or strategic partnership structures. Sophie also raised important personal considerations. You should be clear-eyed about the post-acquisition reality, she advised. Regardless of promised autonomy, acquired companies typically experience significant cultural and strategic integration. Given your personal connection to TechVision's leadership, those dynamics would be additionally complex. This conversation crystallized my thinking about how to proceed. With Sophie's guidance, I drafted a response to TechVision's letter that acknowledged their interest, but indicated that their preliminary valuation significantly undervalued Aspect's market position and growth trajectory. The letter outlined our continued focus on independent execution while leaving the door open for further discussions at a more appropriate valuation. The measured response established that while we weren't dismissing potential acquisition outright, we wouldn't be pursuing it from a position of eagerness or necessity. This strategic positioning would strengthen our negotiating leverage if discussions progressed. Meanwhile, our growth continued unabated. Carol's marketing leadership had dramatically increased our visibility in the mid-market segment, with case studies and success metrics generating steady inbound interest. Daniel's expanded development team accelerated our product roadmap, introducing advanced segmentation features that further differentiated our platform from enterprise alternatives. Most significantly, we secured 2 clients that had been TechVision reference accounts, mid-sized companies that had struggled with their complex platform and embraced Aspect's purpose-built alternative. These high-profile transitions generated additional industry attention and clearly communicated the validity of our approach. 3 weeks after our response to TechVision, Ryan requested another meeting, this time with senior leadership from both companies present. The shift in approach suggested increased seriousness about potential acquisition, likely at a revised valuation. The meeting was scheduled for TechVision's downtown headquarters, a symbolic choice that wasn't lost on me. While ostensibly convenient, for their larger contingent, it also placed us in their territory, subtly reinforcing the power dynamic of established incumbent versus emerging challenger. I arrived with Daniel, Carol, and Sophie, presenting a united front of Aspect's leadership, supplemented by expert advisory. The contrast between our small delegation and TechVision's 7 representatives, including their CEO, CFO, and Ryan, highlighted the difference in organizational scale while inadvertently emphasizing our focused efficiency. TechVision's CEO, Michael Harrington, opened the discussion with practiced corporate diplomacy. We appreciate your willingness to explore potential combination. After reviewing your response and reconsidering Aspect's market position, we've revised our thinking on valuation and integration approach. The ensuing presentation outlined a substantially increased offer, $42 million with additional performance incentives potentially adding $8 million over 3 years. More significantly, they proposed maintaining Aspect as a distinct business unit within TechVision, with me continuing as general manager reporting directly to Michael rather than through Ryan's product organization. This structure addressed one of the most significant potential complications: the awkwardness of having me effectively reporting to my ex-husband. Whether this was a genuine organizational preference or a strategic concession to facilitate the acquisition remained unclear, but it represented meaningful progress toward a potentially viable arrangement. The discussion continued for nearly 3 hours, exploring integration approaches, client transition strategies, and team structure in considerable detail. Throughout, I maintained professional focus, engaging with the business considerations while setting aside the personal dimensions that might otherwise have colored my assessment. As the meeting concluded, Michael invited me to join him for a brief private conversation in his office. Once alone, he addressed the underlying dynamic directly. "I understand the personal complexity here," he said, his tone shifting from corporate to genuinely human. "Ryan has recused himself from valuation discussions while remaining involved in strategic and product integration planning. I want to assure you that any agreement would respect appropriate boundaries and reporting relationships." I appreciated his acknowledgement of the situation. "Thank you for addressing that directly. Whatever decision we make will be based on business merit and cultural fit, not personal history." Michael nodded. "That's exactly the right approach. For what it's worth, your success with Aspect has generated significant respect within TechVision, including among those who initially dismissed the mid-market opportunity." This validation from TechVision's CEO carried meaningful weight, professional recognition divorced from the personal complications of my history with Ryan. As we rejoined our respective teams, the atmosphere had shifted subtly from competitive negotiation toward potential collaboration. Back at Aspect's offices, our leadership team conducted a thorough debrief of the meeting. The revised terms represented significant improvement, addressing many of our initial concerns about valuation and autonomy. "The numbers make sense," Sophie confirmed after reviewing the detailed proposal. "The structure preserves your leadership position while providing access to TechVision's resources and distribution channels." "What about product vision?" Daniel asked, his primary concern consistently focused on maintaining our differentiated approach. "Even with organizational autonomy, would we retain control over our development roadmap?" Carol provided valuable perspective from her TechVision experience. The business unit structure they're proposing typically includes significant autonomy for product decisions within agreed strategic parameters. The key would be ensuring those parameters explicitly support our continued focus on mid-market simplicity. The discussion continued well into the evening as we evaluated the opportunity from multiple angles. By the time we concluded, a consensus was emerging. The revised acquisition proposal merited serious consideration, though several important details required clarification before proceeding toward definitive agreement. That night, alone in my apartment, I reflected on the remarkable trajectory that had brought me to this pivotal decision point. 18 months earlier, I had left my marriage following Ryan's dismissive characterization of me as just a housewife with opinions. Now his company was offering $42 million to acquire the business I had built based on precisely those opinions. The irony wasn't lost on me, yet I found myself evaluating the situation with surprising emotional detachment. The potential acquisition wasn't about personal vindication or proving Ryan wrong. Those psychological milestones had been achieved months earlier through Aspect's organic success. This decision was about determining the optimal path forward for the company we had built, the team we had assembled, and the clients who relied on our platform. The following morning, I arrived at the office early, reviewing our growth projections and strategic plan with fresh perspective. When Daniel arrived, he found me surrounded by spreadsheets and market analysis documents. "You've been here a while," he observed, setting a coffee on my desk. "Since 5, I confirmed. "I've been reconsidering our 3-year plan in light of TechVision's offer." Daniel studied the documents spread across my desk. And I think we need to have a serious conversation about our long-term vision before responding to their proposal," I replied. "This isn't just about current valuation. It's about what Aspect could become independently versus as part of TechVision." This conversation would ultimately determine how we proceeded, whether we embraced acquisition as an accelerated path to market impact or committed to independent growth, despite the challenges of competing against larger, well-resourced players. The decision ahead would define not just Aspect's future, but my own journey from dismissed spouse to respected technology leader. Whatever path we chose, one thing was certain. It would be determined by strategic merit and future potential, not by the personal history that had inadvertently launched this remarkable evolution. The conference room fell silent as I concluded my presentation. Around the table sat Aspect's expanded leadership team: Daniel, Carol, our newly hired Chief Financial Officer Mira Santos, and the heads of our development, sales, and client success departments. The wall-mounted screens displayed our comprehensive 3-year strategic plan, the culmination of weeks of analysis and deliberation following TechVision's acquisition offer. "So that's where we stand," I said, setting down my presentation remote. "Two viable paths forward, each with distinct advantages and challenges. Path 1. Accept TechVision's revised offer of $48 million, with defined autonomy protections and guaranteed product investment. Path 2. Proceed independently with our Series A funding, maintaining complete control while competing directly against an increasingly motivated TechVision." The $48 million figure represented TechVision's latest proposal, increased from their initial $42 million after 2 additional rounds of negotiation. The improved terms included stronger organizational autonomy provisions and explicit product development budgets, significant concessions that demonstrated their seriousness. From a purely financial perspective, the acquisition offer provides certainty and immediate value realization, Mira noted, her background in finance bringing analytical rigor to our discussion. The terms are favorable compared to typical acquisitions at our stage. "But at what cost to our vision?" asked Jason Chen, our head of development. "Even with autonomy guarantees, would we maintain our product philosophy within their corporate structure?" Carol leaned forward, her inside knowledge of TechVision providing crucial context. "Having worked within their system, I can say the autonomy provisions are stronger than anything I've seen them offer previously. That said, corporate priorities inevitably shift over time, and written guarantees only provide so much protection against cultural pressure." The discussion continued, each team member offering perspective from their functional vantage point. Sales saw significant advantages in accessing TechVision's established channels and customer base. Client success expressed concerns about maintaining our responsive support model within a larger organization. Development worried about preserving our agile approach to innovation. Throughout the conversation, I watched Daniel closely. As my co-founder and the technical architect of our platform, his perspective carried particular weight. He had remained thoughtfully quiet during much of the discussion, listening intently to each viewpoint. "Daniel," I said, finally bringing him directly into the conversation. "You've heard everyone's input. What's your assessment?" He removed his glasses, a characteristic gesture when preparing to make a significant point. "I've been considering this from multiple angles. The acquisition offers undeniable advantages: resources, market reach, competitive insulation. But there's something fundamental at stake that hasn't been fully articulated." He paused, gathering his thoughts before continuing. "Aspect was created because existing solutions weren't serving mid-market clients effectively. Not because they couldn't, but because they chose not to. Their incentives, structures, and priorities were aligned elsewhere. TechVision is the quintessential example of this enterprise-first mindset. The question isn't whether they value what we've built now. Clearly they do, or they wouldn't be offering $48 million. The question is whether our mission can survive within their ecosystem over time. Will our focus on simplicity and user-centric design gradually erode as we're absorbed into their corporate machinery?" His words crystallized the central tension in our decision. short-term validation and resources versus long-term mission integrity. The room fell silent as everyone considered this fundamental question. "What do you think, Laura?" Mira asked, turning the question back to me. "As CEO and founder, your perspective on this is critical." I took a moment before responding, wanting my answer to reflect genuine conviction rather than reactive opinion. The past weeks had been consumed with evaluating this decision from every possible angle: financial models, competitive analyses, client impact assessments, team retention considerations. Beneath these practical factors, however, lay a more personal dimension that I had been carefully examining. I founded Aspect after being dismissed as just a housewife with opinions, I began, acknowledging the personal history that everyone in the room understood, but we rarely discussed explicitly. But what sustained me through the challenges of building this company hasn't been proving anyone wrong. It's been proving our clients right. Their enthusiastic response to our approach confirms what we believed from the beginning. Mid-market. Companies deserve purpose-built solutions, not scaled-down enterprise platforms. I moved to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline as I continued. TechVision's offer validates our market thesis and execution to date. The financial terms are fair, perhaps even generous. But Daniel raises the essential question: would our fundamental purpose survive integration, or would it gradually be subordinated to enterprise priorities? Turning back to face the team, I reached my conclusion. After careful consideration of both options, I believe our mission is best served by remaining independent at this stage. We have strong Series A interest, a growing client base, and a product roadmap that extends our differentiation. Most importantly, we have the conviction that we're solving the right problem in the right way, something that could be compromised within a larger organization, regardless of initial autonomy guarantees. The leadership team exchanged glances, absorbing my recommendation. While I held the authority to make this decision unilaterally as CEO and majority shareholder, I valued their input and wanted genuine alignment rather than imposed direction. "If we proceed independently," Mira asked, "how do we address TechVision's inevitable competitive response? They've seen our approach work and could develop their own mid-market solution." "They'll certainly try," Carol interjected. "But having watched them attempt similar initiatives internally, I can tell you their organization isn't structured for this approach. Enterprise DNA runs deep there. They view simplification as feature reduction rather than fundamental redesign. We maintain our advantage through focus and execution," I added. "Every decision we make is optimized for our specific client profile. TechVision will always be balancing competing priorities across diverse market segments." The discussion continued for another hour, exploring implementation details of the independent path, which Series A term sheet to accept, how to structure, the next phase of growth and communication strategies for clients, team members, and the market. By the time we concluded, a clear consensus had emerged in support of independence, with practical action items assigned to each leadership team member. As the meeting dispersed, Daniel remained behind, waiting until we were alone before speaking. "That couldn't have been an easy decision," he said quietly. "Turning down $48 million, with the personal validation it represents, takes conviction." I appreciated his perception of the personal dimension. "The validation was already achieved when they made the offer," I replied. "Accepting it wouldn't have added anything meaningful to that aspect." Daniel nodded. "So what was the deciding factor for you? Beyond the business considerations we discussed?" I considered his question carefully. "Legacy, I think. Not in an egotistical sense, but in terms of impact. If we sell now, Aspect becomes a footnote in TechVision's corporate history, an acquisition that strengthened their mid-market position. If we continue independently, we have the opportunity to fundamentally change how this market segment is served. Plus," I added with a small smile, "I'm not finished building yet." The following morning, I composed a carefully worded email to Michael Harrington, TechVision's CEO. Michael, after thorough evaluation with our leadership team and advisors, I want to inform you that Aspect Solutions has decided to continue our independent growth trajectory rather than pursuing acquisition at this time. We appreciate TechVision's interest and recognition of the value we've created. Your revised offer was fair and thoughtfully structured. Our decision reflects our commitment to our current product vision and go-to-market approach rather than any reservation about TechVision specifically. We remain open to exploring potential partnership opportunities that could benefit our mutual clients while preserving our respective organizational autonomy. Thank you for your professionalism throughout this process. Best regards, Laura Chen, CEO, Aspect Solutions. Michael's response came within hours, gracious in accepting our decision while maintaining a slightly open door for future discussions. Laura, thank you for your direct and professional communication about Aspect's decision. While we naturally would have preferred a different outcome, we respect your choice to pursue an independent path. TechVision remains interested in the mid-market segment and will continue developing our offerings in this space. Perhaps our companies' respective approaches will create complementary solutions that benefit the overall market. Should circumstances change in the future, our door remains open for discussion. Best regards, Michael Harrington, CEO, TechVision. The exchange maintained appropriate business cordiality while acknowledging the competitive reality we would now face. TechVision would undoubtedly accelerate their efforts to address the mid-market opportunity we had validated. More complex was the message I received from Ryan later that day, sent to my personal email rather than my business address. Laura, I'm disappointed by your decision but not entirely surprised. You've always been determined to build something on your own terms, a quality I probably didn't appreciate sufficiently during our marriage. While we'll now be competitors rather than colleagues, I wanted to acknowledge the impressive company you've built and the clear market need you identified before others recognized it. Ryan. The message carried a tone of personal acknowledgement absent from our previous business-focused interactions. After consideration, I responded briefly. Ryan, thank you for your note. Building Aspect has been both challenging and rewarding. I appreciate your acknowledgement of what we've accomplished. I wish you well as we both move forward in our respective roles. Laura. With the acquisition decision behind us, we moved quickly to execute our independent growth strategy. We accepted a $15 million Series A investment led by Foundry Ventures, a firm specializing in B2B software with a strong track record of supporting founder-led companies. The terms preserved our strategic control while providing the capital needed to accelerate product development and market expansion. The following months brought intense activity as we scaled operations, expanded our client base, and enhanced our platform capabilities. We relocated to larger offices in Chicago's thriving Fulton Market District. The exposed brick and industrial aesthetic of our previous space replaced by a purpose-designed environment that balanced collaborative spaces with quiet work areas. The new location symbolized our transition from scrappy startup to established growth company, with room for the team to double over the coming year. Our product roadmap accelerated, with quarterly releases adding capabilities specifically requested by mid-market clients. Unlike our enterprise competitors who built features to win competitive evaluations but that often went unused, we maintained our disciplined approach, implementing only functionality that addressed validated client needs with minimal complexity. 6 months after declining TechVision's acquisition offer, we held our first annual client conference at Chicago's Navy Pier. Over 200 marketing professionals from mid-sized companies gathered for 2 days of platform training, strategy discussions, and networking. The energy was palpable. These weren't just software users, but advocates who had found in Aspect the solution they had been seeking without fully realizing it existed. During my opening keynote, I shared our vision for the future without explicitly referencing our decision to remain independent. Aspect was founded on a simple premise. Mid-market companies deserve purpose-built solutions that respect their unique challenges and opportunities. Not scaled-down enterprise platforms. Not scaled-up small business tools. But software designed specifically for their needs, with every feature and workflow optimized for their reality. The enthusiastic response confirmed we had made the right decision. These clients didn't want to be absorbed into an enterprise ecosystem. They wanted a dedicated partner focused exclusively on their requirements. The most significant validation came during the conference's final reception. I was speaking with a client when Daniel approached with an unexpected guest, Michael Harrington, TechVision's CEO. "Hope you don't mind my appearance at your event," Michael said after Daniel made the introduction. "I registered under my personal email. I wanted to see firsthand what you've built." "You're welcome to observe," I replied, maintaining professional courtesy while slightly surprised by his presence. "What's your impression so far?" Michael glanced around at the animated conversations filling the space. "Impressive engagement. These clients clearly connect with your approach in a way that's different from typical software vendor relationships." We spoke for several minutes about industry trends and market evolution, the conversation remaining general and professional. As Michael prepared to leave, he made a final observation that carried significant weight coming from TechVision's CEO. "You made the right decision declining our offer," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "What you've built here wouldn't have translated effectively within our structure, regardless of the autonomy provisions we offered. Some innovations need to develop independently to reach their full potential." The acknowledgement from a potential acquirer who had offered $48 million months earlier represented powerful validation of our chosen path. As Michael departed, I rejoined our team and clients, more convinced than ever that independence had been the correct choice. The competitive landscape evolved as expected in the months following our decision. TechVision announced a new mid-market edition of their platform, marketed as offering enterprise capabilities with simplified implementation. Industry analysts immediately identified it as a direct response to Aspect's success, though initial reviews noted it appeared to be primarily a licensing and packaging adjustment rather than a fundamental redesign. Ryan led the initiative as TechVision's VP of Product, giving interviews that carefully avoided mentioning Aspect directly, while clearly positioning their offering as a response to our approach. When asked about competitors during an industry panel, he demonstrated professional restraint. "We respect the innovation happening across the marketing technology landscape. TechVision's mid-market solution builds on our enterprise experience, while addressing the specific needs of growing companies. Our response focused on continued execution rather than competitive positioning. We maintained our rapid growth trajectory, with client acquisition accelerating as word of mouth amplified our market presence. Most significantly, we expanded beyond our initial Chicago base, opening offices in Boston and Seattle to support coastal clients while establishing our position as a national rather than regional provider. 1 year after declining TechVision's acquisition offer, Aspect's valuation had reached $120 million, more than double what they had offered. Our team had grown to 75 people, our client base exceeded 300 companies, and our platform was processing marketing campaigns reaching over 20 million consumers monthly. During our quarterly board meeting, Eliza Matsuo, who had remained our most strategic investor and advisor, raised the question that naturally emerged from this success. Have you considered acquisition opportunities of your own? There are several complementary technologies that could enhance your platform while maintaining your mid-market focus. The question represented a fascinating evolution in our position, from acquisition target to potential acquirer in just 12 months. After careful consideration with the leadership team, we identified 3 smaller companies with technologies that would integrate naturally with our platform while preserving our core simplicity. Our first acquisition, a social media automation tool built specifically for resource-constrained marketing teams, closed 4 months later. The $15 million transaction brought valuable technology and talent while reinforcing our commitment to purpose-built solutions for mid-market clients. The founder joined Aspect as our VP of Social Solutions, bringing entrepreneurial energy that aligned perfectly with our culture. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. The company once targeted for acquisition had become an acquirer itself, extending our vision through thoughtful integration of complementary capabilities. The transition represented the full maturation of our journey from founding concept to market leadership. On the second anniversary of Aspect's founding, I stood before our now 120-person team gathered in our Chicago headquarters. The traditional anniversary celebration had become an important cultural moment, a time to reflect on our journey while looking toward future horizons. 2 years ago, Aspect began with a simple observation. Mid-market companies were underserved by existing marketing technology solutions. I began, surveying the diverse group that had joined our mission. Today, we've transformed that observation into a thriving company serving over 400 clients nationwide. We've built technology that respects the specific needs of these organizations rather than treating them as smaller versions of enterprise, clients, or larger versions of small businesses. I continued, acknowledging the challenges of our journey without explicitly referencing the personal catalyst that had started it. Our path hasn't always been straightforward. We've faced competitive pressures, scaling challenges, and pivotal decisions about our future direction. Through each of these moments, we've remained anchored to our founding vision, creating software that genuinely helps mid-market marketing teams succeed on their terms. Looking toward the future, I outlined our expanded vision. As we enter our third year, we're extending our impact beyond software alone. Our new professional services team will provide strategic guidance alongside our technology. Our growing partner network will create specialized solutions for industry-specific needs. And our forthcoming Thought Leadership Institute will produce research and insights dedicated to mid-market marketing excellence. The celebration continued long into the evening, with team members from all departments sharing stories and aspirations. As the event wound down, I found myself in conversation with Carol, whose transition from TechVision had been such a pivotal development in our growth. "Have you seen the latest industry reports?" she asked, referencing the quarterly market share analyses that tracked the marketing technology landscape. TechVision's mid-market edition is struggling. Their client acquisition is far below projections, and they're seeing higher than expected churn. "I had heard rumblings," I acknowledged. "Any insight from your contacts there?" Carol nodded. "The fundamental issue is exactly what we predicted. They approached the mid-market as a matter of feature reduction and pricing adjustment rather than truly understanding the distinct needs of these clients. The product remains fundamentally designed for enterprise use cases, just with fewer buttons and a different pricing model." This validation of our product philosophy reinforced the correctness of our decision to remain independent. TechVision's resources and market presence hadn't been sufficient to overcome their enterprise-centric approach. Meanwhile, our purpose-built solution continued gaining momentum precisely because it had been designed from first principles for mid-market requirements. Later that evening, as the office finally quieted, I found myself alone in my office, reflecting on the remarkable journey, from dismissed spouse to CEO of a thriving technology company. The nameplate on my desk, Laura Chen, Chief Executive Officer, represented a transformation far beyond professional title. It signified the reclamation of identity, purpose, and agency that had been gradually diminished during my marriage. My phone chimed with a notification, an email from Ryan. "Laura, congratulations on Aspect's second anniversary. The company you've built has fundamentally changed how the industry thinks about mid-market solutions. You may have heard we're restructuring our mid-market initiative. After 2 quarters of underperformance, we're reassessing our approach." I find myself reflecting on conversations we had years ago, when you first raised concerns about enterprise software's limitations for growing companies. You saw something I missed and built a successful company around that insight. I don't expect a response to this note. I simply wanted to acknowledge your achievement and the vision it represents. Ryan. The message represented a remarkable evolution from just a housewife with opinions to acknowledged market visionary. While personal vindication had ceased being a motivating factor long ago, there was undeniable satisfaction in this recognition from the person who had once so casually dismissed my perspective. After brief consideration, I replied, Ryan, thank you for your note. Building Aspect has been the most challenging and rewarding experience of my professional life. I appreciate your acknowledgement of what we've accomplished. The mid-market represents unique challenges that require dedicated focus rather than adaptation of enterprise approaches. I believe there's room for multiple successful solutions in this space, each addressing different aspects of these clients' needs. I wish you well in your continued endeavors, Laura. Setting my phone aside, I walked to the window overlooking Chicago's evening skyline. The lights of downtown buildings created a tapestry of illumination against the darkening sky, each representing organizations with their own missions, challenges, and aspirations. Among them were our clients, companies whose marketing efforts were now empowered by the platform we had built specifically for their needs. 2 years earlier, I had been defined primarily through my relationship to someone else, Ryan's wife, the supportive spouse, the woman whose professional identity had been gradually subsumed into her husband's career. Now, I stood as the founder and CEO of a company valued at over $120 million, leading a team of 120 people, serving hundreds of clients nationwide, and recognized as an innovator in our industry. The transformation hadn't been simple or straightforward. It had required courage to leave a marriage that no longer served my growth, vision to identify a genuine market opportunity, persistence to build a company from concept to reality, and conviction to decline acquisition when independence better served our mission. The journey had begun with dismissal. Just a housewife with opinions, but had culminated in validation beyond anything I could have imagined when first leaving my marriage. Most importantly, that validation now came from the market we served, the team we had assembled, and the impact we created, rather than from any external approval or personal vindication. As I prepared to leave for the evening, I glanced again at the company mission statement displayed prominently on our office wall. Empowering mid-market businesses with marketing technology built specifically for their needs. What had begun as a personal journey of reclamation had evolved into something far more significant. A mission that created value for clients, opportunities for our team, and transformation in an industry that had previously underserved an important market segment. This evolution, from personal motivation to meaningful mission, represented the most important aspect of my journey from housewife to CEO. The company I had built wasn't merely a response to dismissal, but a genuine contribution to the clients we served. In creating Aspect Solutions, I hadn't just reclaimed my own identity and purpose. I had built something that empowered others to achieve their potential as well. That, more than any valuation or market recognition, was the true measure of success, and the foundation upon which we would continue building in the years ahead. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.